All right, welcome back, everyone. We'll start in a minute with Wendy. There she is. Excellent. Hello, Wendy. So
Hello.
from Northern Ireland, we travel to the south of Ireland. Wendy is in Waterford. I don't know if right now, but generally. And Wendy O Leary is a third-year PhD student at Waterford Institute of Technology. And she is currently working on a project related to identity and Terry Pratchett fans. And very intriguingly, she is going to talk about I Ink, Therefore I Am, elementary forms of Terry Pratchett fandom. Over to you, Wendy.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my bedroom. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm just going to see if I can work this slide. Yeah. Okay. So I know that my content looks like a lot, but everything will be very brief. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out the speed to go on the slides, because if I go too slow, then they don't go. If I go too fast, then bear with me. I'm not technical at all.
You're doing fine.
Yes. Okay, so first I'm going to have a small disclaimer, then I'm going to have a brief introduction. We're going to talk about what exactly is a tattoo, do something really quick and interesting on the brief history of tattooing, why people are motivated to get tattoos. We're going to talk a bit about liquid modernity, just to put things into context, really. Brief about the method and the groups I'm in, and then we'll get into the actual, Durkheim and fan stuff. So the clan, individual totems, narrative, and how you perform fandom, and then I will end. Okay, so just before we get into things, I would just like to say, for anyone who is here that is tired by the comparisons of fan culture and religion, that despite the similarities I'm going to share with Durkheim's elementary forms, fan cultures are secular. They're not religious, nor does religion enter the conversation. My comparison doesn't suggest that fandom is a religion, nor is it my intent to actually stereotype fans. My interest lies in the similarities between certain elements, so like the clan and tattooing, that Durkheim mentions in his study. Okay, now that's out of the way. Okay, so this paper explores Terry Pratchett fandom through a Durkheimian framework, which foregrounds the totemic link between clan and symbol. So more specifically, I'm going to focus on the tattoos that us as fans ink on their body as a means of expressing both a personal and a collective identity. So I'm going to argue that the affective relationship a fan has with the text plays a large part in the decision to tattoo a reminder of that text onto the body. So in Modernity and Self-Identity, Anthony Giddens writes that the self is seen as a reflexive project for which the individual is responsible. We are not what we are, but what we made ourselves. The reflexivity of the self extends to the body, where the body is part of an action system rather than merely a passive object. So throughout his work, I think what Giddens is trying to do, he's characterizing late modernity and what it means to be human today. And Giddens notes that our bodies are connected to the process of actualizing a self-identity. And for me, this is where tattoos come in. Okay, so tattoos are a form of body modification. So the changing of the body by various means from its original state to an altered one. And regarding tattoos, then we have the concept of permanence, and this exists in two forms. So we have non-invasive and invasive. So non-invasive, we don't alter the body structure, whereas with invasive, they can either be temporarily or permanently modified. And then within this group, we have obviously two subgroups, which is temporary, which has no lasting effect, and then obviously permanent, which causes a permanent alteration. So a tattoo then is a permanent invasive activity which deposits pigment into the skin to create a design. And tattooing from the research has been practiced in practically almost every culture. Tattooing has been regarded as a cultural marker, it's seen as art, an expression of the self, virility in men, strength, fertility on women, but it also has been seen as mental instability, deviant behaviour, criminality, and at times a symbol of resistance from the margins of society. And in some cases, it's also been used as a form of punishment and social control. And Clinton Sanders, in Customizing the Body, the Art and Culture of Tattooing, writes that while tattooing does have these negative connotations, tattooing is important for social communication and as a cultural signifier. So we'll just go back a bit. So in the late 1800s in America, we had an increase of popularity of, circus shows and carnival sideshows or freak shows. And the first heavily tattooed woman to work in one of those shows was Nora Hildebrandt in 1882. And within a short time, a few more women became heavily tattooed and joined these shows. And while they were immensely popular, they did begin to wear less clothing so that women could start to display their tattooed skin. And the drawback of this surge in popularity of the shows was that as more and more men and women began to get tattoos, it did start to become associated with vulgarity and deviance. And the growing number of people getting tattoos so they could earn a living at one of these shows meant the original performers were forced to get more diverse tattoos or wear less clothing in order to display all of their tattooed flesh. And this change led some to describe the shows as being like peep shows. So in the following century then, tattooing slowly began to lose acceptance as an upper class practice, and it became associated primarily with criminals, sailors, sex workers, gang members, and obviously the freak shows. There is some speculation, however, that changes in attitude happened because of stricter rules in the Victorian era. And by the mid-20th century, the tattooed performer of one of these shows stopped drawing any crowds. They were still considered vulgar, but seeing a tattooed body was no longer a novelty or interesting. And then later in Europe, tattooing was used as a social control tool. This marks a sinister shift in social ideology during the 1930s when Nazi Germany used tattoos to control and stigmatize the bodies of Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals. So what I want to stress here is that attitudes towards tattooing has shifted continually throughout recorded history. The evaluation, whether critical or appreciative, really has depended on who's observed, who's doing the observing, and obviously the time period of that observation. So what motivates a person to become tattooed has really been of academic interest for quite some time. I'm going to stay in the 1930s for the moment, just for interest's sake. So back then, a gentleman called Albert Parry wrote a work called Tattoo: Secrets of a Strange Art Practiced by the Natives of the United States. And in this novel, in this research, he attempts to explain how he viewed tattoos in his current social context and the motivations behind these actions. So Parry describes motivations to become tattooed as you can see, a primitive desire for an exaggerated exterior. He states that tattooing is mostly the recording of dreams, and that a large element of dreaming in a Freudian fashion is the repressed sexual world fighting its way to the surface. So after describing the act of tattooing as a sexual act, Parry states that American girls who are tattoo addicts get their first tattoo designs at about the same time they have their first sexual experience. And he illustrates this point by discussing a rape case that occurred in Boston a few years before he began his study. And in this particular case, the prosecutor, the jury, and the judge decided that the men accused could not be convicted because the girl was guilty of contributing negligence. This woman had a tattoo, and therefore she was considered a as misleading the men into thinking that she was loose or available. So Parry concluded this section of his work by discussing the motivations of women to become tattooed, and he compares it to clothing, stating that for women, clothing is a sexual adornment meant as bait to attract men. So while these views, we hope, are no longer, they might not seem relevant today, psychology-based studies especially do repeat the negative cultural stereotypes that have been prevalent for decades. And such studies are centered on the notion that people who become tattooed demonstrate at-risk behavior. This includes substance abuse, tendencies towards violence, self-injurious behavior, suicide, and gang affiliation. So Zygmunt Bauman and his work on liquid modernity describes the nature of modern life, explaining that ideas, fashion, technology, relationships, and even consumer products can just disappear incredibly quickly. And his theory of liquid modernity highlights the precariousness of the paths that we are walking today. So we no longer focus on the long term. We are all about short term. Okay, so he notes that change is the only permanent and uncertainty the only certainty. And that just reminded me so much of Pratchett. In The Art of Life, he writes that in these liquid times, we are all the artists of our own lives, not by choice, but by universal fate. We're happy as long as we haven't lost the hope of becoming happy. But within liquid modernity, impermanence and uncertainty go hand in hand, and this can lead to feelings of inadequacy, and this in turn affects our own self-identity. And while tattoos are permanent, this is inconsistent with Bauman's liquid modernity. But looking for this permanence is a reason to get tattooed. So while some parts of identity are fluid, fans show commitment and devotion to their object of fandom that run counter to Bauman's liquid modernity. So, as some of you know, you've probably seen me in the groups asking questions. My research utilizes methods of digital ethnography where I am a participant observer. So currently I'm in 21 groups between Pratchett and Tolkien. So I'm hoping that by identifying the experience of the fan phenomena that I can have a deeper understanding of the meanings of the fan experience. But for this paper, I'm only using quotes and comments from 2 groups, just to kind of cut it down a bit. Okay, so due to the internet and large advertised events, you know, like San Diego Comic-Con and things like that, society has become more and more aware of fan communities. And while we have some areas like costume play, which are seen as being sometimes in a negative light and hypersexualized, wearing fan-related clothing does mark you out as a fan of that particular, whether it's book, TV show, movie. And while clothing and jewelry are, you know, they do this and they show a level of affection, tattoos, I believe, show a deeper level of affection and self-expression towards the object of fandom. And it's been argued that individuals seek to express and reclaim themselves through the art of getting a tattoo. The design of the tattoo should ideally reflect some aspect of the self that is otherwise without public expression or is repressed by society. So in his study, Emil Durkheim analyzes totemism of Australian tribes to understand the essential features of religion. And he found that at the basis of most of the Australian tribes, there is one that holds a dominant place in collective life, and that is the clan. And individuals within a clan are bound by special kinship, which does not come from being bound by blood. Members of the same clan are only considered kin if they share the same name. By considering themselves a clan, it means they have the same mutual obligations, whether that is of mourning, vengeance, intermarrying. The Australian clan is one that bears the same name as a species of a material thing. And the clan believes it is one that bears the same name. Oh, I said that already. The clan believes it has a special relationship with the thing which it is named after. And the species that designates the clan is called its totem. So if we go into Lawrence Grossberg, he writes that affect is closely tied to what we often describe as the feeling of life. effect operates across all of our senses and experiences, across all of the domains of effects which construct daily life, and it is what gives colour, tone and texture to the lived. So I'm suggesting here that the clan's relationship with the totem is an effective one, and this is similar to Pratchett bands. So we have certain emblems that represent our community. So bees, lilacs, the character of death, and the guarding dark, for example. So while Durkheim notes that the clan may not all reside together, by sharing the same name, we feel its unity. So throughout my research, and we saw it here yesterday in some of the comments as well, that we thank the admins for being accepted into the Facebook groups, and then start commenting things like, I found my tribe and I've come home. So similar to the clans in Durkheim's studies, fans become part of the communities which, while not familial, can still represent a family and find meaning from within the clan and their effective relationship to its totem. So within the clan, we have the name of the clan. So we're either called Kevins or Loonies, depending on who you speak to. So while we have the collective totem, we also have an individual one. And this is something that everyone maintains a personal relationship with, a particular thing which is comparable to the relationship everyone maintains with its totem. So the individual and their totem are closely bound together, and it functions as a patron for the individual. And within the Durkheim's clans, it's seen as a shield for the individual. And we see similar behaviour in the community. So in response to a question that I posted back in February, some of the comments that were posted to me, messaged to me, I did get a little bit upset with them, not because they were rude, but because they were so deeply personal, and deciding to share them with me for my research, and if you're publicly commenting as well, you're also sharing them with the other fans. And some of the things that they endured, like bullying, abuse, attempted suicide, illness, just some of the comments that I gotten. And throughout the telling of these stories, they all attributed Terry Pratchett with helping them get through their pain. So Emma writes that she was bullied a lot for being different. She never felt like she fit in. Finding Pratchett's work really saved her, and she grew up with Tiffany, and she wanted to show on the skin the impact that the novel has had on her. So within the clan, totems are displayed on weapons, houses, clothes. But Durkheim argues that inscribing a totem onto the body is extremely important, and tattooing plays a large role in totemism, and notes that within contemporary society, tattooing has not died out. And the best way of attesting to oneself, he writes, and to others that we are part of the same group, is to imprint the same distinctive mark on the body. The purpose is not to embody and evoke a particular object, but to bear witness that a certain number of individuals share the same moral life. So here he's noting that the behaviour within the tribes clearly shows the role played in clan and community, but we can also attribute that to what happens within the fan community as well. So narrative would also play a very important role, and Paul Sweetman argues that tattoos have an ability to narrate connections to specific periods. And Craig wrote that he was diagnosed with cancer at age 18 in 2002. He read Thief of Time, hooked immediately, and it's kept him laughing through chemo and bone marrow transplant. So the Discworld speaks to his own experience and effective relationship to the text. So tattoos have become part of his personal and interior biography. So the way a person dresses is a form of visual and tactile communication. It's a public and private presentation in that it can reveal or mask a person's inner psyche. Tattoos are also an outward expression of private meaning, and having a tattoo in an area that is often seen by the public exists as a public display of identity. So Becky and Carol were two others that shared their story. And Becky has the death of rats on her chest in the Sunset Way Foundation. She writes that Terry has shaped her, his writing has shaped her thinking, how she sees the world. And Carol writes that he has the guarding dark on his shoulder as part of a sleeve of meaningful tattoos. And here we can see that there's a purposeful reference to the Discworld novels, but it's also a symbol, especially in Carol, a protection symbol with the guarding dark. And tattoos then, for everybody so far that I've spoken to or read comments on, are a permanent reminder of an individual's identity as a fan and of their affective relationship with the Discworld. And Goffman argues that an individual performs an identity in the front stage and the back, but in tattoo terms, these stages can merge together. Okay, so so far I've spoken about Durkheim's concept of the totem and affective relationship the clan or fans have with it. The totem is a representative of the clan and its members. It ensures a community among the civic family, which makes up the clan. Community-wise, fan communities function like a clan. They go across geographic borders. Members aren't bound by religion or culture, but by the actual object of their fandom, in this case, Terry Pratchett and the Discworld. The affective relationship that a fan has with the text plays a considerable role in the decision to ink a permanent reminder of the text onto the body, as it commits the fan to a particular narrative, as well as marking that individual out as a fan. So tattoos then become a means of expressing a personal but also a collective identity and marking oneself out as a fan. Thanks. And I do have references, but they're small, so I'm going to go back the way.
That's all right. Very good. Thank you, Wendy. So we have questions coming in. Sorry, I lost it now. While I find it, I'd just like to ask you: is your research? Are you doing any text analysis of how people write about the tattoos or their?
Oh, you broke up there at the start. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are you doing any analysis of how people talk about their tattoos? I'm probably not doing very well, but
yeah. So the tattoos is actually only forming like a small subsection of a chapter. I'm looking into the way, so it's like how everybody communicates online and how everybody interacts at the conventions. So this is just a small bit of it, and it's more so how the text creates meaning, which in turn helps create the identity of the person that's reading the text. And tattoos are just a small part of that.
Right, but very interesting part. Yeah. And do you find that in these groups people talk about their tattoos very quickly or readily, or do they need prompting? You mentioned that you have a specific question out there. I was wondering.
Yeah, because I'm in so many groups, I didn't want to limit my tattoos to just one of them. So in the Terry Pratchett ones, I think I asked in 4 of the groups, but for them in actual one of the particular groups, it's literally just for tattoos. So everyone that joins posts in photos of them. Some are readily giving their story about their tattoo, and others do need prompting. It depends on how personal the tattoo is to that person.
Yeah. Right. So here is a good question. How do you, as a researcher, with the stories that are shared with you? You mentioned that you found some of them sort of moving and upsetting.
Yeah. It can be, because I have a lot of private messages from people that don't want to do it publicly, but they're willing to do it privately and become anonymous that way, and that's great. But there was a few that did make me cry, just because they're just so personal and they really resonate with you. And it's just like, there's one group in particular that I'm in that I was going to study, but everybody was sharing such deep personal bits that now I don't do my research in that group. I'm there to be supportive for the other fans that are there, but I don't take notes on that group at all. That is very private, and no, that's just one of the things that I went, I can't. I'm going to step back from being in that group as a researcher and just be there as a as a fan and as a female, and just, yeah, it can be a little bit difficult to go. I mean, it's a really interesting comment and an interesting story from a research perspective, but as a human being, I need to have some empathy about what I put in. Like, do I really want to share something that could be found on the internet? Like, it's just, yeah, it can be tricky.
It's interesting. Did you anticipate that when you kind of went through the ethics approval?
No, actually, we
when you
didn't.
started off, yeah.
It was no, the ethics approval. No, we didn't really. I didn't anticipate some of the stories that I would get. So, you know, people who have so one that I was given permission to share was this girl as a teenager tried to kill herself, and her family didn't know what to do, and her granddad bought her a book. Sorry, she saw a book in the hospital case, and it was marked, and just the whole of that story was just, I was not expecting those kind of stories to come at me. Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness. Yeah. So let's move to a light question. What's the funniest you encountered?
Oh, I mean, I've seen some really good ones of the Knack McFeagles. They've been great, because they're just, the tattoo artists have just gotten their expressions and their positioning and stuff. So none of them have really been funny, but I think the most humorous ones are probably the Knack McFeagles.
Very good. Yeah, and is there a huge variety in terms of the quality of the tattoos?
There's a massive difference in the quality of tattooing. Yeah. Some of them have been great, and then others, no, not so much. Right.
Oh, and here's another good one. What about people who decide to go for Terry Pratchett's themed tattoo for other reasons than helping them cope with hard times?
Well, some of them have gotten tattoos for like memorialization reasons. So when Terry died, a lot of them got things like that. Others just wanted you know, a reminder of the text. Some of them just wanted to you know, share, you know, some of them, like, they're what we call tattoo enthusiasts. Like, I have like 14 tattoos. Not all of them are because of hard times. Some of them are just because I like the design. My death tattoo on my calf is just because I really do like the character of Death in the Discworld. So I tattooed him onto my calf. So yeah, these are the ones I focused on because they were the ones that I felt more deeply created a definite effective relationship with the Discworld and Terry.
Yeah. And yeah, at the danger of branching out the scope of your talk, but someone is wondering about differences between Tolkien fans and Discworld fans. When it comes to tattoos.
There are a lot of differences between the Tolkien and Pratchett fans in regards to everything, in the way they interact with each other, in the way they talk about the works, in the way they talk about Tolkien and Pratchett. I could do a lot on the differences between the two, and it's an interesting dichotomy between them. And as a whole, and I hope I don't alienate any Tolkien fans who happen to do this, but as a whole, in the groups that I'm in, the Pratchett fans seem to be a lot more communicative with each other, but they also seem to be a little bit more supportive when questions are asked. So there's what you would get is, you know, if someone asks a question about Pratchett, there's always a few people commenting, and it's really great and really supportive. But what you get in some of the Tolkien groups is, why don't you go read the book? So yeah, there's a big difference between the two groups so far.
Very good. I think I'll stick with the Pratchett fans for the time being.
Yeah.
Just in case you haven't read the comment, the same persons wanted to point you to the upcoming Fan Studies North American online conference, because there's a session on embodied fandom
Oh, brilliant.
That sounds like it would be
Yeah,
relevant to you.
that would be
Right.
great. Thanks, stranger.
Right. More questions. The Fiegels, are they popular because they're themselves a tattooed?
I found so far that the Guarding Dark seems to be the most common that I've seen. I mean, they're definitely there, but it's definitely the Guarding Dark and a witch's hat seem to be the top two that I have come across so far.
Right. So, so often there's a few tattoos that make up the majority, and
Yeah,
then there's sort of
and
a
then
low.
there's different ones, and also the Grim Squeaker, he comes up quite a bit as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that fans tend to have more tattoos with meaning?
Well, I can only comment yes, because I've only studied fans with tattoos. There are a lot of studies there based on people who get survivors of abuse who get tattoos, and people who have attempted suicide have gotten some tattoos with meaning as well. So from my perspective, while there is research there, I can only really comment on the fan part. But so maybe we'll keep in that nice vague area where I'm not really committing to one answer.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, my chat is jumping about a bit. Someone else corroborates your differentiation between Tolkien and Pratchett fans. Is Rincewind a common tattoo subject?
No, he's not actually. The witches, bees, lilacs, guarding dark, and death of rats. They're the ones so far. I don't think I've seen a Rincewind tattoo. If someone has a Rincewind tattoo, please feel free to show it to me. But I haven't seen one.
Excellent. Yes, we'd be delighted if this conference gave you further material.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. And someone says, yeah, Rincewind needs to come up more in this conference. It's unusual for the lack of discussion around Rincewind. Yeah. There's some discussion on kind of the studying fans as a new field of study.
Well, fan studies itself isn't really a new field. It's been around. Fan studies has been around since probably, I don't know, since the original Star Trek, as they were the first fans to be studied. The purpose, I suppose, there's different purposes for studying fans. So you can study the consumer behaviors of fans. You can so the consumption patterns and things like that. If you want to get in on brand marketing, you can study fans that way. My purpose in studying fans is I want to know how they find meaning in a text, and it could be interesting for further research on identity topics as a whole, as sociology. It's also, I'm applying new methodology. So I'm applying Ricoeur and hermeneutics and symbolic interactionism with Bauman all together, which hasn't been done before. So it's interesting. So hopefully we'll get some new information on fans and further the field really and what we can do with us as a whole, as a group.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Back to the tattoos. I think most of the images you showed us were images.
Yeah.
What about quotes or mottos?
Yeah, so there's Mind How You Go comes up. I Ate and Dead comes up. Uh, I mean, yeah, they're the two I've seen the most. Some might get quotes that mean a lot from the actual books, but the ones that have shown me the most are the Mind How You Go and I Ain't Dead. So
Yeah, yeah, very good. And are the majority of tattoos sort of recent? I don't know, last 5 years or so, or do you have any fans who got that tattoo decades ago?
yeah, there's a few who've gotten some a while ago, and then there's fans now who are over 60 and deciding now's the time. It's no longer so taboo for me to get one. So I had this amazing lady over 60 post up a photo of her and her daughter. They had gotten Terry Pratchett tattoos, and it was the first one, and she was so excited to get one. Yeah, it was brilliant. So it's a mix. So some fans have older tattoos, and then you have older fans getting new tattoos,
Yeah,
and it's brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, excellent. Yeah. Okay. I think we're coming to the end of the questions.
All
So
right. Cool.
we'll leave it there. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Wendy.
No problems. Thank you.
And